white. I really do. Seriously, if you're not white, you're missing out, because this is thoroughly good. But let me be clear, by the way, I'm not saying that white people are better. I'm saying that being white is clearly better. Who could even argue? If it was an option, I would re-up every year. Oh yeah, I'll take white again, absolutely. I've been enjoying that. I'm gonna stick with white, thank you.
And let's face it, there's no denying that white people in the US have had privileges throughout history that people of color simply haven't.
Hello, how you doing? My name is Antonio. My page Unapologetically Black ADOS. Ask that you like and subscribe to the page and share my videos so we can begin to get this message out. Today I want my black people to understand is that white people who fail to monetize their white privilege are the white people who are going to fight the hardest to deny critical race theory. And you have to, and you say, what do I mean by that statement is the fact that Europeans have had an advantage in every aspect of American economic system, and these white people who are angry and in fear of black progress are the very ones who was not capable of taking advantage of their very own white privilege.
Consider the very first law passed by Congress after ratifying the Constitution, the Naturalization Act of 1790, which said that free white persons and only free white persons could become full citizens of this country. Basically, our very first law as a constitutional republic gave white immigrants privileges that black people and immigrants of color and indigenous Native North Americans weren't given, all of it based purely on skin color. And whether we want to acknowledge it or not, this kind of systematic white privilege and race-based favoritism is built into the very foundations of the country.
You have to understand that during Mississippi's secession letters from the Union, that they had acknowledged that their core economy was based off of crops produced in a tropical environment that white people did not have the physical makeup to bear. So them ending slavery would have economically destroyed white America is because they was only leeching off of the labor of black Americans. A declaration of immediate cause would induce and justify the secession of the state of Mississippi from the federal union. In the monumental steps which our state has taken of dissolving its connection with the government of which we so long formed a part, it is but just that we should declare the prominent recession which have induced our course. Our position is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery, the greatest material interest of the world. Its labor supply, the product which constitutes by far the largest and most important portion of commerce of the earth. Those products are peculiar to the climate, verging on the tropical regions, and by an imperious law of nature, none but the black race can bear exposure to the tropical sun. These products have become necessities of the world and a blow at, and so to allow them to continue to leech off of the backs of black America before they gave us citizenship. America did the Homestead Act, giving white people land. During 19th century, when the United States was primarily a nation of farmland ownership was particularly important. As the United States pushed westwards in the same area, the federal government became responsible for administering newly acquired territories and coordinating their settlements. The Homestead Act of 1862 and 1866, which granted free land to U.S. citizens who would settle it. I just need us to understand that at the time that Europeans did the Homestead Act, that black Americans was not yet considered Americans, or citizens, so we was not able to participate in the Homestead Act. So when they gave that free land out, it was given to all white people. So I'm not trying to hear the critical forcing us to have to work white people land, continuing us to enrich white people. I need us to understand that there is no decade within American history that that the government has not worked in order to propel white Americans above black Americans. Immediately after the Civil War, they had began to do the Homestead Act and giving Europeans free land, and they had not declared black American citizens until the year that they ended the Homestead Act. And due to this reason, black people again ended up tied to southern land, working land owned by white people, given to white people by the government, and their income was generated strictly off of our labor.
These riots broke out in dozens of cities across the country. But in the rural South, something even more menacing was taking form. There, slavery existed in all but name. In a system called sharecropping, farmers provided landowners with labor for a share of crops produced. But the system was rigged. Sharecroppers were often kept in perpetual debt.
One black sharecropper raised $500 worth of cotton, and his landlord told him, yeah, but you used $697 worth of supplies, so you owe me money.
Everyone who has any power at this point is working to make sure they keep African American laborers tied to the land.
We must ask ourselves, how did these Europeans get this land if it was not for their whiteness? African Americans and the federal land policy exploring the Homestead Act of 1862 and 1866. We examined the history of the U.S. land policy with a focus on the Homestead Act, underscoring the previous position of African Americans during the Homestead period. We discussed the historical context and the shift political landscape of the Civil War and Reconstruction era, providing the context for research on federal land policies and programs of race. Past research is almost entirely outside of the agriculture and applied economic profession. We believe that the applied economic discipline is especially suited for empirically examining the influences of the federal land policy on the past and present disparities and racial makeup of American culture. For most of us, U.S. history, popular understanding of economic opportunities has been connected to property rights and ownership.
In 1935, Franklin D. Roosevelt put his signature on the Social Security Act.
Look at all the social programs that pulled the U.S. out of the Great Depression and helped create the middle class in this country. Programs like job insurance, which provided cash to people to give them a leg up as they looked for work.
To show how job insurance works, let's introduce Steve, a Louisiana worker who has just lost his job. He goes first to the nearest state employment office to register for a new job. Steve needn't hesitate about going in because this office was set up just to help people like him.
But while Steve in Louisiana could apply for job insurance, not everyone else could.
Of course, he cannot collect if he belongs to any of the groups of workers that the law does not insure. These are agricultural workers, domestic service in private homes,
agricultural workers and domestic service.
Economic conditions of black workers at the turn of the 20th century. Contemporary assumptions of the Negro economic status at the turn of the 20th century vary according to the comments to the penal racial debate over heredity or environments as the key explanation for the depressed economic status of Afro-Americans. The author of an article published in the Textile World, Southern Oregon, printed in Boston, demonstrated that the prevalence of racial mythology is economic judgment. When he claimed that only whites could be employed in cotton mills because the hum of the machinery would put blacks to sleep. Although the prominent white sociologist German Dorm agreed that Negroes were not without aptness in the mechanical arts, he believed that black operatives produced defective work because of their constitutional, and hardening physical and moral unfitness for the exacts of manufacturing operations. Factory workers called for prolonged attention, patient discipline, temper, and social adaptability, and those qualities Negroes did not possess. Down determined that these presumptions defects were hereditary. Black perceived the problem differently. A Negro woman complained that too many whites claimed. You have to understand, whites did this, push for this agreement to exclude those specific laborers after they intentionally discriminated against you in every other industry in order to force you to work a field that only you had the capabilities of doing. But they didn't want you to have the access to the land for you to build the wealth. They wanted you to be able to do it for generate wealth for white people. This is why I say white people who have not monetized off their white privilege are going to do whatever's in their power to deny critical race theory. But there's no denying facts. There's no denying that you did all these efforts in order to give yourself an advantage over black people, with you getting assistance from the government that we pay the same taxes into. White people need a leg up. They need assistance. They understand they are unable to actually compete with black people on an equal playing field, and because they understand that deeply down, they would not acknowledge their white privilege. They refuse.
Thousands of people get a big thrill out of looking at model houses, and a much bigger thrill when they buy one.
It was the same story with crucial housing assistance for the American middle class. Loans provided by the FHA, the Federal Housing Administration, allowed working class families for really the first time in American history to own their own homes.
Home ownership is the basis of a happy, contented family life. And now, through the use of a National Housing Act insured mortgage, is brought within the reach of all citizens.
But the way the bill was written, the American dream of home ownership wasn't within the reach of everyone. For the first 30 years of the program, about 98% of the recipients were white. People of color were almost completely barred.
According to Bankrate, research from ATTOM, a curator of real estate and property data, shows that lenders originated more than 284,000 HELOCs in the second quarter of the year, a sizable jump from the 251,975 HELOCs borrowers opened in the first 3 months of 2023.
Americans are sitting on tens of trillions of dollars of home equity. Here's where homeowners are offered the largest and smallest loans equities. American homeowners are sitting on 28.7 trillion of home equity. That's significant. Even if the amount has fallen from a record 31.8 trillion in the second quarter of 2022, to put the latest figures into perspective, that's more than $334,000 of equity for each home-occupied house united in the U.S. While most homeowners are unlikely to have that much value built into their property, many are nevertheless tapping into their equity they are generating through home equity loans. To better understand how much money homeowners are looking to borrow against their equity, LendingTree analyzed more than 580,000 home equity loans offered to users of our online loan shopping platform from January 1st through July 31st, 2023. We found that average size of a home equity loan offer is $75,000 or higher in each of the nation's 50 states. Across the nation, 50 states, the average home equity loans amount offered to homeowners is $104,102. Through the 50-state average is 6 figures. Not all homeowners are offered such large loans. In fact, loan amounts can vary by tens of thousands of dollars by state. For example, the average offered home equity loan amounts in Massachusetts of $145,788 is nearly double that average amount offered to borrow in Mississippi, $75,288. Mississippi, one of the poorest counties in the state. It's the poorest state in the 50. So, but what we have to understand is that Black Americans, we stay in a capitalist society, and what America did was gain white people an asset that they denied black people access to when they created the Federal Housing Authority in 1936 or 1933. But you have to understand that blacks had a high home ownership rate prior to them creating the Federal Housing Authority. As far back as communities, Syndicate Village, which was now Central Park, where blacks had a 50-60% home ownership. You had Rosewood, blacks had a 50-60% home ownership right. You had Telcom, Texas, blacks had 50-60% home ownership. This without the Federal Housing Authority. You had what we call Black Wall Street that they burnt down. 50-60% home ownership prior to the Federal Housing Authority being created, allowing white people for the first time to have that opportunity in mass numbers to gain home ownership, while denying blacks that access. So you also have to understand that when we stand in a capitalist society and white people have access to this side of the capital that you do not have access to, that is an advantage. I'm a person who sells products for a living, so you have to understand sometimes it is opportunities that I cannot take advantage of because I do not have certain access to capital in order to purchase those products. Sometimes I have to purchase products at a lower rate, at a higher price, because I have to purchase a smaller amount because I don't have the access to capital to purchase it at the full truckload necessarily that would get me the lower cost that I can pass on to my customers and make my business even that much competitive. So at every step and level in America, the government has worked in order to give Europeans an advantage, and giving Europeans the opportunity to purchase houses was basically giving Europeans the opportunity to have individual banks. So we have to understand, black people, white people that grew up in a society that gave them all the advantages is never going to own up to critical race theory when they fail to monetize their own white privilege.